Imagine, I locked you inside a room. No phone. No internet. No money. No supporters. No weapon. No way to escape. Now, let me ask you a question. Can you still force a government to listen to you? It sounds impossible. After all, governments have armies, police, prisons, courts. They control laws, resources, and sometimes even information. So what could one ordinary person possibly have that could compete with all of that? May 5th, 1981. A prison cell. Northern Ireland. A 27-year-old prisoner named Bobby Sands hasn't eaten for 66 days. Every morning, the guards place a tray of food outside his cell. Every morning, they return to find it untouched. And then, something almost unbelievable happens. While Bobby Sands is still dying, inside prison, he wins an election. He becomes a member of the British Parliament. Think about that for a second. A man who cannot even walk to a polling booth wins an election. Not because he shouted louder, not because he fought harder, but because he refused to eat. How does that even make sense? How can doing nothing become one of the most powerful political acts in history? How can an empty plate frighten a government? And why do some hunger strikes change history, while others disappear without anyone noticing? Before we understand why hunger strikes work, we need to answer a much simpler question. What exactly is a hunger strike? Think about it. Every single day, billions of people eat without giving it a second thought. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's one of the most ordinary things human beings do. So when someone consciously refuses food, they aren't simply skipping a meal. They're breaking one of the strongest biological instincts we have. And that's exactly why people can't look away. Now, here's where things become fascinating. Throughout history, power usually belonged to those who could inflict pain on others. Kings had armies. Empires had cannons. Governments have prisons. No weapon. No attack. No violence. Just one person saying, I refuse to cooperate with a world that refuses to hear me. And somehow, that becomes political. Why? Because it forces us to rethink what power actually means. More than 100 years ago, a German sociologist named Max Weber noticed something fascinating. Every modern state depends upon what he called the monopoly over the legitimate use of violence. The police can arrest you. Courts can punish you. The military can use force to defend the nation. Private citizens generally cannot. But a hunger striker never tries to compete with the state's violence. They don't build a stronger army. They don't pick up a bigger weapon. Instead, they quietly step outside the game. It's almost as if they're saying, you may control my freedom, You may even control my future. But the one thing you cannot force me to do is willingly nourish my own body. So far, we've answered one question. What is a hunger strike? Now comes the harder one. Why does it work? How can an empty stomach become political pressure? The answer isn't hidden inside the body. It's hidden inside society. Because hunger alone doesn't change governments. The meaning people attach to that hunger does. Think of today's chapter like solving a mystery. We're going to collect 5 clues. Each clue comes from a different sociologist. And by the end, you'll understand why hunger strikes sometimes change history and sometimes don't. Our first clue comes from Michel Foucault. Foucault believed that power isn't exercised only through laws or violence. It is exercised through the body. Schools train bodies. Hospitals regulate bodies. Armies discipline bodies. Prisons control bodies. The body is where power becomes visible. Now imagine someone inside a prison choosing to stop eating. The government can lock them up, but it cannot force them to cooperate. Suddenly, the very body the state wanted to control becomes a form of resistance. Our second clue comes from Émile Durkheim. Durkheim believed that every society creates things it considers sacred. Not necessarily religious, but morally powerful. Our third clue comes from Erving Goffman. Goffman compared social life to a theater. Everywhere we go, people perform roles. Politicians, journalists, citizens, protesters. Everyone has an audience. Imagine 2 headlines. One says, "A prisoner refuses food." The other says, "A man is willing to die for justice." Exactly the same event. Completely different story. That's framing. Our final clue comes from James C. Scott. He called them the weapons of the weak. Not everyone has money. Not everyone has political power. Not everyone has an army. But almost everyone has their own body. A hunger strike is one of those weapons. It doesn't attack the government. It attacks its legitimacy. It quietly asks society one uncomfortable question. What kind of government allows this to happen? Now, put all 5 clues together. The body becomes resistance. Suffering becomes sacred. The protest becomes a performance. The media turns it into a story. And society decides whether that story matters. That's the hidden machinery behind every hunger strike. We've uncovered the theory. But theories are only ideas. Do they actually work in the real world? There's only one way to find out. Let's test them against history. There's an old saying in science: a theory is only as good as the evidence behind it. We've spent the last few minutes building a sociological explanation for hunger strikes. Now, it's time to test it. Let's see what history has to say. Our first experiment takes us to India. Long before the world knew the name Bobby Sands, another man had already discovered the political power of voluntary suffering: Mahatma Gandhi. But Gandhi didn't invent fasting. India already understood it as a spiritual practice. His genius was transforming a deeply personal act into a public political language. When Gandhi fasted, he wasn't trying to defeat his opponent. He was trying to awaken their conscience. In 1932, his fast against separate electorates created enormous public pressure and eventually contributed to the Pune Pact. Whether one agrees with Gandhi's position or not, the sociology is unmistakable. Suffering became moral pressure. Our next experiment comes from India again, and this one changes everything. In the year 2000, Irom Sharmila began a hunger strike after the Mallam killings. Her demand was simple: repeal the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Days became months. Months became years. Years became 16 years. Surely, if suffering creates pressure, this protest should have succeeded. But it didn't. The government force-fed her. AFSPA remained. Did sociology fail? No. Something else was missing. The audience. Outside the Northeast, much of India rarely followed her story. There was no continuous national spotlight, no sustained public pressure. The mechanism had lost one of its essential parts: visibility. Now compare that with another Indian protest. Anna Hazare, 2011. The demand, this time, was a stronger Lokpal. Television channels covered every hour. Social media exploded. Millions joined. Within days, the government entered negotiations. Notice what changed. Not the country, not the method, not even democracy itself. The difference was attention. One protest remained regional. The other became national. And once you notice this pattern, you begin seeing it everywhere. The suffragettes in Britain, Cesar Chavez in America, political prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, Turkish prison, death fasts, Palestinian prisoners. Different cultures, different governments, same invisible mechanism. Again and again. But here's the uncomfortable truth. History doesn't reward every sacrifice. Some hunger strikes become front-page news. Others remain invisible. Some become symbols. Others become statistics. The difference is rarely the courage of the protester. It's whether society chooses to watch. So now, our mystery has become clearer. A hunger strike isn't powerful because someone stops eating. It's powerful because people stop looking away. But that raises an even bigger question. If you were the government, what would you do? Until now, we've seen the story through the eyes of the protester. But every story has another side. Imagine for a moment that you're no longer the person refusing food. You're the government. Inside one of your prisons, someone has stopped eating. News channels are beginning to notice. People are gathering outside. Every passing day, the pressure grows. What do you do? Whatever you choose, someone will accuse you of being wrong. At first, the answer seems simple. Just accept their demands. But governments rarely think one protest ahead. They think 10 protests ahead. If one hunger strike succeeds, what stops another? And another? And another? Every concession creates a precedent. The first option is negotiation. Sit down, talk, compromise. Governments usually choose this path when refusing becomes more expensive than agreeing. Think back to Anna Hazare. The government didn't negotiate because the hunger strike became morally correct overnight. It negotiated because the political cost of ignoring it kept increasing. The second option is silence. No press conference. No negotiations. No public reaction. At first, this may seem like doing nothing. But sociology reminds us that silence can also be a form of power. Now imagine the protest continues. Weeks pass. The protesters' condition becomes critical. If they die, the government may be blamed. If they intervene, they're accused of violating human dignity. This is where many governments choose force feeding. The final option is the one every government hopes to avoid. Do nothing. Allow the hunger strike to reach its end. But death changes everything. A living protester can still negotiate. A dead protester becomes history. By now, you've probably noticed something interesting. The real battle was never about food, or prisons, or even the protest itself. It was about legitimacy. Who deserves the public's trust? Who deserves the public's sympathy? And perhaps this is the most uncomfortable lesson of all. Millions of people experience hunger every single day. Most of them remain invisible. A hunger strike becomes powerful only when society decides that this suffering must be seen. Attention isn't just awareness. Sometimes it's power itself. Let's step away from history, away from prisons, away from governments, and return to the question we asked at the very beginning. How can someone with no weapons, no money, and no political office still challenge a government? Perhaps they never had no power. Perhaps we were simply looking for power in the wrong places. Most of us grow up believing that power belongs to those who command, those who control, those who can force others to obey. A hunger strike quietly challenges that entire idea. It reminds us that power doesn't always begin with force. Sometimes it begins with conviction, with the willingness to bear a cost for something greater than yourself. But sociology also teaches us to be careful. Not every hunger strike changes history. Not every sacrifice finds an audience. And not every act of courage is remembered. Sometimes people suffer in complete silence. Maybe that's what sociology does best. It takes something we think we already understand and quietly changes the way we see it. Today, it wasn't really about hunger strikes. It was about power. Tomorrow, it might be because every ordinary event hides an extraordinary story if you know where to look. If this video helped you see the world a little differently, I'd love to have you back. Here at Nerd on Mute, we don't just learn theories. We learn how those theories quietly shape the lives we're already living. Until next time, stay curious. Keep questioning. And remember, learn the theory, live the lesson.